we're going to get into Miss Julie Roys and the scare quoted journalist today anyway. And J-Mac, who apparently is a prosperity pimp, Dr. John MacArthur of Strange Fire, who has done more to speak against the prosperity gospel of anyone else on the planet. He is living a prosperous lifestyle. He has been successful in life. So now, again, on Julie Roys, I was on her program up for debate. I debated a Roman Catholic, I debated a professor at Moody about whether or not Roman Catholics are Christians. He said, yes, they are Christians. I said, no, it was a debate. Julie Roys said, I agree with him, not with me, but with him. I do think Catholics are Christians, but she was a nice lady, and her reporting on on James MacDonald was great. But then it's like she got the taste of blood in her mouth and started going after the good guys, not the bad guys. The irony is the one warning us about James MacDonald was John MacArthur, not Julie Roys. John MacArthur was warning us about James MacDonald before Julie Roys even knew who James MacDonald was. And yet she's going after John MacArthur. What changed Julie was the Me Too movement. So it's woke, and she's woke now. Whatever. She just became a feminist overnight. That's why it's called a downgrade. As Spurgeon said, everything's going downhill at breakneck speed. So at the speed of light, Julie Roys changed her entire ideology in regard to evangelicalism. And now she's a social justice warrior working for the dark side. Anyway, she's done some hit pieces on Dr. MacArthur. She primarily hates MacArthur because MacArthur believes the Bible in regard to lady pastors. That's my summary. But let's get into this article in particular. And David, why don't you summarize it for us?
Yeah. So she basically goes through talking about, apparently she's got a hold of John MacArthur's, I don't know, his tax returns or, how much he makes or this and that and the other. And basically goes through and saying, hey, he lives too high on the hog. He's making too much money, or he lives in too nice of a house, or this and that and the other. So clearly he's just like the prosperity preachers, which is insane, but
right.
That's where she
so
is.
Here's the title: The Prosperous Lifestyle of America's Anti-Prosperity Gospel Preachers. So let me make some clear caveats, and I got to go quick here because we're already carrying on in the program. We went way too long in the first segment. Let me explain this as someone who has polemicized the prosperity gospel movement more than most. Okay. I mean, tens of thousands of articles about the prosperity gospel and how awful it is. By the way, I learned all that from John MacArthur. The scandal regarding the prosperity gospel is not the prosperity. The scandal is when you have the prosperity gospel. The scandal, the heresy, is the notion that if you essentially that the reason why Jesus died on the cross, so they would believe and teach, is for you to have health, wealth, and prosperity. That the purpose of Jesus dying on the cross is for you to have stuff. And oftentimes, that prosperity gospel, most of the time, is associated with the seed faith teaching idea that God is bound contractually to give you back a 7-fold or 100-fold increase, or whatever fold the telethon guy on TBN was just given by the Holy Spirit. Maybe it's 23-fold because it's the 23rd of March or something. That if you give, God will give you back, and that the purpose of giving is to receive. But the reason why the prosperity gospel is heretical is because it takes the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ, which is about the salvation of sinners and the propitiating sacrifice of Christ, in which he absorbed God's wrath on behalf of sin, and turns the point of the gospel into God has provided a means for you to become rich through the atonement of Jesus. The problem is not prosperity in and of itself. But Julie doesn't quite seem to get that. And she describes MacArthur as railing against prosperity gospels, likening them to greed mongers, true enough, taking aim at a scandal-plagued evangelical leader like Ravi Zacharias or Carl Lentz, right? In which MacArthur said, false teachers always do it for the same reason, filthy lucre and money. And he's right. As a matter of fact, Peter says the same thing in his epistle, that they're doing it for the sake of money. They're trying to manipulate you. So as I explained to, I don't know, a Bible study class recently, I don't think it was on the podcast, but false teachers usually accompany the lascivious and grotesque wealth. Okay, so an appeal to the flesh that is financial, they're usually doing it for financial gain. And the second thing is there's usually sexual immorality plaguing these guys. Like Benny Hinn would be a good example of both. Todd Bentley would be a good example of both, right? So MacArthur's right, and I don't think that she necessarily takes exception to that, but then says John MacArthur and his family preside over a religious media and educational empire that has over $130 million in assets and generates more than $70 million a year in tax-free revenue. Let me stop there for a second and ask the question, David, what is the what's the controversy in regarding to having a ministry that has $130 million in assets? What is the controversy?
Yeah, I'm not sure that this sentence this was one of the several ones that sort of clued me into where I think, without saying I'm judging her heart necessarily, kind of clued me into where I think her heart is on this, because she says right here, generates more than 70 million a year in tax-free revenue.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, which is just saying, actually that's the government's money. We want the government to tax ministries, apparently, according to Julie here.
Right. Yeah. And by the way, we'll be talking about Jeff Dornick in the Patreon portion of the podcast after this segment, but he does the same thing. He's complaining about the tax-free money. Well, what John MacArthur does is ministry. What Julie Roys and Jeff Dornick do is not ministry. They should be taxed. He should not. But the point of it being tax-free is not primarily that the person who receives it is not taxed, because they're using it for ministry-related purposes, but it's so that those who are giving it are not taxed. A lot of people overlook that when it comes to a 501c3, that it's not just that the church is not taxed. It's that if I have done what Paul said to the church in Corinth, and I set aside money on the first day of the week to be given to the Lord, I've covenanted to the Lord to give this. It belongs to him. I've designated this for him. So I give it as an offering so that when special needs arise, a special offering does not have to be taken. Just as Paul tells the church in Corinth, then I shouldn't be taxed on that. That was not my money. That was God's money. And the lesser should not tax the greater. And the church is greater than the state, so the state cannot tax the church, because the church is the body of Christ and Caesar cannot tax Jesus, right? If that makes sense. So the problem with ill-gotten gain is not the gain part, it's the ill-gotten part. So it doesn't matter if a ministry has $1 billion sitting aside. The only question is if it's ill-gotten. And if God gave it, and they weren't promising seed faith offerings, it's not given in exchange for promises of divine blessing, there's no controversy. That's how people wanted to bless it. Grow up. And this is a selfishness. Ironically, this is a demonstration from Julie Roys that she herself has a greedy spirit. Covetous of what it is that the Lord has provided, not to John MacArthur, but to his ministry. No one needs to believe that MacArthur is sitting on $130 million in assets, but that the ministries run or started by him and run by Grace Community Church and Grace to You, the Lord has blessed primarily because there's not a finer preacher alive than John MacArthur. Let's get further into that article, though. What else do you see on there, David?
Well, after she goes through, his assets and how much money, comes into the ministry, and
how about
the fact
this one?
That he's got family on the payroll, and
MacArthur and his family and related companies have been paid more than $12.8 million from ministry and donor funds. And MacArthur owns 3 luxury homes. Well, let me just stop there. We'll get to the homes in a second. He's been paid more than $12.8 million from ministry and donor funds. Didn't MacArthur just finish his 50th year? Was it his 50th anniversary?
Yeah.
I wonder how much I've been paid. Hold on a second. Let me figure it up.
I'm just talking about family-related companies. What does that mean? That could be 400 people for all you know. It's a stupid stat to cite.
Yeah, hold on a second. 200. I am going to figure it out.
I think not to get too far ahead, but I think my favorite part of this was when she talked about his home that was a mere 11 miles from the beach. That's my favorite part. I'm going to get to that. I want to scroll down to here. I got to see this.
Okay. Well, my income, I've made about close to $5 million in my lifetime just from salaried positions. And I'm 40.
How dare you?
Yeah, not from the church, but mercy sakes. Yeah, after all these years of ministry, more than $1 million, dun dun dun, in ministry.
You're pretty much Benny Hinn.
Yeah, I'm really rolling in it. When you have 7 kids, that $52,000 a year, boy, you're just really rolling in dough. But it adds up over decades, right? It adds up over decades. To say that he's made he and his family have made $12.8 million. I'm sorry.
Well, and it was there was another cat. It wasn't just family.
It's so
it was
stupid.
Like his friends too. And she lumped a whole bunch of people in.
Oh, did she?
Yeah, it was more than just family.
I hope you're friends with the people that you work with. The whole thing is just it's retarded. There's not a better word for it.
It's tabloid. It's tabloid hit journalism is what it is.
Right. Okay. So then where was the line about he owns 3 quote unquote luxury homes worth millions. And she goes on to describe one of those homes as 3 as a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home. So he's clearly rolling in it. And she complains that he has a home in Colorado Springs on property that was given to him. And I guess I'm a little sympathetic to that, because if there was a guy, well, it was the Hebrew roots guy. As a matter of fact, you've heard me talk about the Hebrew, the 12 tribes guy that tried to kill me a few years ago. You remember that, David?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
A cult literally sent someone to, I think, kill me or to get me to kill him. He complained about my 5 cars or whatever it was that I had. Well, one of the vehicles was a church woman's. It was a disability accessible van that I let her park at my house, and he's assuming that it's mine. It was for her disabled daughter. And then I had 2 vehicles at the time, and maybe a third one for my daughter. So there was some exaggeration. But again, like right now, I have like 4 vehicles. They're all over 100,000 miles, except for one. But somebody could look at that and say, he has 4 vehicles. Yeah. And I have 4 people in my house that drive. So, or someone could say, well, you have You have a second home, a cabin. Well, I do have a cabin. And it's on 20,000 acres of great real estate in the middle of nowhere. Imagine Servetus Diablos or Jeff Dornick getting a hold of that. But when you look at the details, you'll find out that cabin was converted from a garden shed, and it's on property that was given to me. Why are you holding it against me that someone gave me something nice? Like, if you can't rejoice with those who rejoice, if you're going to be upset because the Lord has blessed someone, like, you have problems. In the meantime, I am about to buy a third home in the other part of the state because I'm over there a lot, and I particularly like the Flathead region. And so it's going to be an investment home that is rented out. I'm not going to live there, but it's going to be there in case I need it, or in case my daughter needs it when she goes to school, because that's where the universities are over on that side of the state. When quote unquote journalism is done this way with sensationalism, it can make anyone look bad or nefarious. David, if I looked at your life, I'd probably see things that I could take and say, look at this guy, look at everything that he's got.
You should see my music studio.
Yeah, you have a music studio. Where is it? Where is your music studio?
I'm sitting in it right now. Is it in
your house?
Prosperity music studio.
Is it in your house?
Oh, yep.
You have a music studio in your house.
I know.
You must have a mansion. So in this, here's what I'd like to clear up though. In 1 year alone, MacArthur made more than $402,000 for part-time work at his broadcast ministry, and another $103,000 from Masters University, not counting his royalties and his speaking fees. So here's where we could add some clarity. That was a particular year in which the church got caught up on his back pay, that they did not pay him. The same thing happened at my church where, when I came here, they paid me $500 a month because there were 14 people in the church at the time. Obviously, since then, we've grown a bunch, but after 5 or 6 years and the church is running 100 people and we have a budget now of a couple $100,000, the church said, we want to provide you retirement for the years that we didn't give you any retirement. So I got a check for $17,000. And somebody could say, wow, you got a bonus for $17,000. Yeah, after working for $500 a month for years, and having no retirement, no benefits, being bivocational, when the Lord blessed the ministry blessed me so that I have retirement. What's untoward about that? If someone is complaining that MacArthur that 1 year made $500,000, I'm going to say, I think he was underpaid. The question is, did he get any of that money by promising people some kind of tangible blessing on account of giving money? Or was he selling the gospel? Was he making false promises? That's what would make this a scandal. Not that he wrote books and they were really successful books and that made Grace to You successful, and so he's being taken care of. Furthermore, I want to point out, I genuinely think I make more money than Dr. MacArthur. What I mean by that is maybe not on the dotted line financially, like in terms of a check, but he lives in Los Angeles. That's a little bit different than living in Tulsa, Oklahoma, or Sydney, Montana. Now, our real estate prices are just as high here, but Los Angeles and Sun Valley or Santa Clarita or wherever he lives, this is an affluent area. The church is in Los Angeles. It's like looking at someone in San Francisco paying for an apartment for, some outrageous amount, $100,000 a year or something really stupid. And you think, well, they're just living it up. Yeah, it's a roach-filled apartment. My brother-in-law is a surgeon in New York, in Manhattan, and he pays $750 a month for a parking space rental. And he has a, quote, $1 million luxury apartment in Manhattan, $1 million luxury apartment that's 800 square feet. 800 square feet. I live like a king compared to him. And he's a surgeon. He's getting close to $1 million a year. I have a higher quality of life, or higher, you know what I'm trying to say. So what's the words I'm trying to find, David? I have a higher standard of living. That's it. Than what he does because of where I live. He's in Los Angeles. What's the big deal?
Now this article is legalistic, and it's judgmental, and it's unbecoming, and it's, she exposes more about herself in this article than she does about John MacArthur.
I had texted, I'm not going to say who, but someone else, and said, why don't you take Julie Roys down a peg or two? And I just want to read to you what they sent. So many basic journalistic mistakes, they write. There's an absence of adequate sourcing and documentation. A Roy's report chart of JMAC's compensation. Where are all the original 990s and tax documents and financial reports? There's no substantive interviews or quotes. There's several major factual holes. Guessing when she didn't have enough facts, she says, quote, he likely earned. Likely? Is she serious? And thinking a $1.5 million house purchased 35 years ago in California is some kind of mansion level property value? Really? And insinuating that being, quote, 11 miles from the beach is somehow the equivalent. Find that in the article, David. Yeah. I got to make fun of that. Is somehow the equivalent of owning a seaside palatial estate in Malibu. She says, I could weigh in at some point on Christian muckraking. It's getting really bad and has nothing to do with restoring the church. I'm all for real journalism and real reporting about church corruption across the board, but not the Julie Roys variety. Did you see the line about the 11 miles from 11 miles from the ocean?
Yeah, in California, that'd only take them about an hour and a half to get there.
Right. 11 miles from the ocean. So I'm not a real estate expert, but I've watched enough House Hunters to know that like 11 miles from the beach is where white trash people live. Right? Like yeah. If one of those realtors, if they were like, well, we have a house 11 miles from the beach, does that count? Like it wouldn't even make it on air. But if you look at, well, I have it here.
I'm just trying to figure out what she was spending the time doing since the last MacArthur hit piece about not reporting supposed COVID infections at Grace Community Church to the authorities. Like that article didn't do what she wanted, so let's go dig into John MacArthur's finances and see if what's her deal with him? Is it really just over the gender issue, just over female pastors and that kind of a thing? I think that there's got to be something else here. I know she seems to be irritated over COVID and the fact that he's standing up to that.
This line here is obnoxious. By the way, she says that she tried to email Phil, and Phil just sent her a short one.
I'm shocked that Phil responds to anything anymore.
I'm looking at Phil's emails here. I have them on my phone. I'm looking at Phil's emails with Julie. They're quite lengthy and explanatory, although he does point out that muckraking isn't journalism, and spinning narratives to advance an agenda isn't journalism. Trying to make social media rumors go viral isn't journalism. He does rip her a new one in here, which is typical Phil. Good for him. But she's lying. There's the email. She's lying. She's making stuff up. Look at this line. While it's true that MacArthur has lived in his home in Santa Clarita since the 1980s, the property is worth $1.5 million.
Chump change where he lives.
Well, not only is it Trump change, but what did that house call? Is it his fault that the house has appreciated in value that he's lived in since the 1980s? I mean, he's lived in the same house for 40 years. 40 years. It's like Sam Walton driving around in the same Jeep that he had when he started his first Kmart back before there was Walmart. And now he's a billionaire. I mean, he's dead now, but when he was the richest man in the world, he's driving around in the same vehicle. You really want to accuse him of being all about the money? MacArthur's lived in this same house where he has resided since the 1980s. It's worth 1.5 million now. Not only is that, yes, chump change, like in terms of where he's living, but how is it his fault the house is appreciated in value? My home, I think I could probably sell my home for $350,000. I had to guess. Well, guess what? I only paid $200,000 for it. So my home is worth almost twice what I paid for it. And somebody could look at that and say, wow, you know, a polemics minister lives in a $350,000 home. Yeah, well, it was a $200,000 home 10 years ago. And given the real estate prices where I live in the South, where I'm from, that would be a $160,000 home. It's called appreciation. This is muckraking at its best. So David, you had asked the question, why is she doing this? Well, he has a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bathroom home that is located next to a private club with a golf course, tennis course, pool, and fine dining. When I was a newlywed, we lived in an apartment complex on a 9-hole golf course called the Links in Jonesboro, Arkansas. And it had a clubhouse and its own golf course. Yeah, and rent was $750 a month. Who gives a crap? Why does any of that matter? But David, you asked the question. Here's the answer. She wants to bring down a man of God because she's wicked. I don't think that's an oversimplification. John MacArthur is one of the most faithful men in the 21st and 20th century. He has lived a very humble lifestyle given his success. There's no indication that he has gained a penny through untoward means. And let me tell you this too. Before you complain about what someone makes, you need to know what it is that they give. You need to know what it is that they give. The same things have been said about Phil. You know, look at his salary. He makes $250,000 a year or whatever it is. Phil Johnson, and by the way, it's not like we have a good relationship or that I'm best friends. I'm not saying I'm best friends with MacArthur or friends with Phil or anything else. Obviously, I think everybody's relationship has been stressed in recent years. And I've criticized MacArthur for 2 things. The first one was his view of Romans 13 back before he changed it. And then I applauded him for changing it, even though they haven't really admitted he's changed it. He changed it. But I applauded his stance now on Romans 13. And I disagreed with him having Dever, Duncan, and Moeller at Shepherd's Conference. And now I think MacArthur regrets it. But because I have criticized them at all, you know, I'm now cast to the outer darkness, more or less. You know, I'm persona non grata, even where I was one of the few places I was ever accepted. And that's sad. But I'll tell you from experience, Phil Johnson is one of the most generous people I've ever met in my life. I mean, he's bought plane tickets for me. I saw him with his own, hey, I'll tell this story. Why not? We brought somebody to Shepherd's Conference with us one year who was a school teacher, didn't have a lot of money. I thought he was registered. He wasn't registered. I saw Phil Johnson because I talked to him about this. Oh, he didn't get in. He wasn't registered. Phil walked over to the little bookshop at ShepCon, took out his own wallet and paid his registration of like $400 or whatever it was. He paid for it himself. The guy he didn't even know. I'm willing to bet that he does that all the time. And if someone wants to complain about the money that I make from my 25 different things I have my hands in order to make tents to provide for my large family, and I hope my family gets even bigger, they better know darn well what I give back to the church before they complain about what it is that I make. If they were local in my congregation, I would probably say, I tell you what, I'm going to give you permission this one time to go talk to the treasurer or the assistant treasurer, and you ask them if I'm a faithful giver or not. Like, the left hand shouldn't know what the right hand's doing. I don't want to brag, but if somebody wants to push, well, you got 4 cars. Before you complain about my 4 cars and my cabin in the wilderness or whatever else you want to gripe about, do you know what it is that I give to the Lord or to other causes? That's what makes something or someone greedy or not. What would make someone greedy is if they if they receive and don't give. But John MacArthur and Phil Johnson have a lifetime of evidence as givers. What's Julie Roy's? And we'll talk about Jeff Dornick in a moment. What's Jeff Dornick's? And so, whereas we should all be a little bit skeptical when someone will talk endlessly about social justice like Russell Moore when they're living in a well-to-do mansion, the difference between a guy like Russell Moore and John MacArthur is John MacArthur's actually accomplished something in life and the Lord has blessed him, whereas Russell Moore's just living on the teat of the cooperative program. And furthermore, it's Russell Moore who wants to redistribute your wealth. He wants to socialize medicine and give welfare to illegal immigrants. He wants to steal from you to accomplish his notions of what justice is. John MacArthur, not so much. Julie Roys needs to repent of her muckraking journalism. I mean, obviously we've been accused of muckraking before, but at least what we present is the actual truth. There's muck to rake, but the muck that Julie Roys is raking is just pure hot garbage without any evidence or substantiation at all. It's not journalism. It's garbage. David, anything on this segment before we take off?
Yeah, it's. I mean, I have no doubt that a good portion of this article has true things in it, but the biblical angle on this is what I guess I'm most concerned about. You know, because the fact that she would consider this news or something that was important to expose shows that she has no biblical understanding of any of this. Which,
well, and even she complains that the home in Colorado is on 2 acres.
It's not that much.
2 acres is not much. It's not in Colorado, and you're in Colorado, right? Like 2 acres is like I live in the middle.
Well, she says it's the largest home, 7 bedrooms, 7.5 bath ranch on 5 acres in Colorado Springs, El Paso County. But that describes a lot of homes in El Paso County. It just does.
Well, again, I don't know why any of it matters.